and welcome to another episode of Freight to the Point, a podcast from Zencargo. I'm Helena Wood, and I'm joined by James Fry, the Director of Solutions here at Zencargo. It's great to have James on the podcast. Frankly, I don't know how we've not had you here before. Today, we're going to be talking about how freight forwarders and shippers should work together and the services that freight forwarders should be offering to ensure that their supply chains can be competitive and supply chain goals are met for customers. Welcome, James.
Thank you very much, Helena. It's a pleasure to be on the podcast, and I'm looking forward to having the conversation today.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining. And for anyone who's listening who doesn't quite understand what a Director of Solutions maybe does, do you want to give us a quick intro to your role?
Sure, yeah, definitely. So here at Zencargo, the solutions function sits across the entire customer journey. So right from when we're having early conversations with our customers all the way through to when we're working and we're in partnerships with our customers. And what we're doing is we're trying to identify how Zencargo can help develop and optimize and add value to our customers' supply chains. So right from those initial conversations, we're understanding their challenges and pain points in their current supply chain. And then we're helping to map that to a future world kind of state with Zencargo, where our solutions and services as a digital freight forwarder can help solve some of those challenges. And we're doing that kind of consultation services all the way across the customer journey. So really trying to drive as much value from our customers from their supply chain as possible.
Which is super interesting. And how do you get into that, James? What's your background that led to you being in this position?
So probably like quite a few people in this industry, kind of fell into it at university. I kind of came out of my A-levels, didn't really know what I wanted to do. I always kind of had an affinity with the water, and I kind of thought about kind of marine engineering or something like that. But then I kind of got exposed a little bit to the world of shipping, found a degree course up in Liverpool, which sounded really exciting. Decided that why not? Let's go on that course. Learn all about some parts of freight forwarding, some parts of shipping. I learnt how to captain a ship. I was on a ship simulator. It was very kind of wide ranging, kind of the skills that I learned from that. But essentially coming to the end of my degree course, a forwarder in the UK, Allport Cargo Services, were Allport at the time, reached out and said they had a graduate scheme. Would I be interested in joining? And it was 2009. So it was obviously in the economic kind of crisis we had back then. So it was not the best time to be trying to find kind of opportunity coming out of university, but I was very fortunate with the graduate scheme they offered. I didn't really know what freight forwarder did joining that, and it took me definitely a good, dare I say, maybe 8, 10, 12 months before I really understood what a freight forwarder did. But yeah, I was really kind of privileged really to have that opportunity, and I kind of worked around all the different operating offices of Allport at the time, all across the UK. I got to spend some time in Hong Kong learning kind of the origin operations, which was really great. And then kind of from that graduate scheme role, I kind of found that my niche, or kind of the area that I really enjoyed doing, was in kind of the supply chain management side. So working with some of the kind of the large importers in the UK, trying to understand and identify where, as a forwarder, kind of value can be added across their supply chain. So looking at initiatives from kind of consolidation to vendor management and things like that.
That's super interesting. I hadn't realised your university course was so broad. I kind of want to go and have a drink and learn about captaining a ship and all those things that you learned about.
It was very exciting. Yeah, it was very broad. I picked a degree kind of course, which was very broad. And it was good in a way, because then that helped me actually figure out kind of what I wanted to do. But yeah, it was an exciting 3 years for sure.
Nice. And then obviously through your Allport experience, you've really seen the full breadth of sort of freight forwarding from the ground up, which means that you're in such a sort of great position to then be consulting and giving advice to customers on how to structure things today. But also, I would imagine, James, that you've probably seen that full development of the emergence of digital freight forwarders as a kind of concept and an entity, the growing division between the sort of more traditional world of freight forwarding versus this more modern digital world. And you know, what's that felt like as you sort of watched things develop and change while you've been in the industry?
Yeah, it's been refreshing. It's been really rewarding as an individual kind of working in that kind of sector and seeing those benefits. Allport at the time were very pioneers in kind of the element of supply chain management and kind of technology which drive better supply chain management, and their product was helping a lot of the large importers into the UK and the supermarkets to really start understanding the benefits of being able to get visibility off a purchase order or off a SKU, and how that impacts not just like the import or supply chain part of the business, how that really drives success across the entire business. So I was very fortunate to kind of have exposure to that from for a company that really pioneered that. And then it was quite interesting then to kind of see like some of the stark contrasts between other kind of more traditional players, maybe smaller, kind of more national to more multinational players as well. But I think being exposed to that's really got my first then for the technology side of supply chain, because that's really where I saw a huge amount of value. And it's probably one of the main core reasons why I kind of jumped at the opportunity to move across to Zencargo, because Zencargo obviously being a digitally native freight forwarder is something that more traditional forwarders can never really do. They can never go back and be native. They've built solutions they've bolted on solutions to try and be kind of more digital, but never going to have the benefits of kind of Zencargo being a native kind of digital freight forwarder. And it's just really, I love it. Like I'm kind of exposed to customers on a day-to-day basis. I'm working with them. I'm understanding what their challenges are. And we're fortunate here at Zencargo to work with customers who may be shipping a few containers a month up to hundreds of containers a month. And it's really nice to understand what's really kind of interesting when you start understanding their levels of digitization, their capabilities, or I suppose their expectations from forwarders, because there is still quite a difference. You can't necessarily see a direct correlation between like age of your supply chain or volume in your supply chain and levels of digitization. It's not direct like that. So I just love kind of having that exposure and being able to understand that, okay, well, actually, you're moving quite a significant amount of volume. You're still managing a lot of the operations on spreadsheets. So I suppose, going back to the question, I've actually loved right from day one to where I am now, seeing this journey of digitization. I feel like I've been on like the forefront of that within kind of freight forwarding, which is super exciting. But it still surprises me, conversations I have on a day-to-day basis with customers who are not really fully utilizing those benefits that they can have from their relationships with a freight forwarder.
Yeah, I think there's maybe a bit of a don't judge a book by its cover sort of moral or parable in there of, just because the supply chain is large or feels significant doesn't mean that it's run in the most digital or modern way. And what are you, because obviously you mentioned a few things that I kind of want to break out in there, but let's talk first of all about customer challenges, because you've been speaking to customers over the course of a very, very rocky few years. And I'm sure you've seen the full range of, challenges and pushback that come from customers. What are you hearing right now? What are people struggling with in today's environment?
So it's really interesting right now. So obviously we're seeing, in some regards, a consequence or the reverse or the flip side of what we saw kind of in the past couple of years, really. So the challenge, I first joined Zencargo 2.5 years ago now. So that was right at the very first lockdown, which is really kind of quite bracing really for me to be kind of joining digital freight forwarder right at the start of something that was so significant to the industry. I never really thought that it would be that significant. And I remember hearing about kind of the pandemic when it was first kind of making an impact in China, and no one really thought it's going to move across into Europe or America, but kind of little did we know kind of how much an impact it would have. Right from those points, the challenges were directly linked to customers not having enough inventory really in the right places at the right time, because obviously then people went into lockdown. No one knew, no one could predict the kind of behaviors that would drive it from a consumer. But obviously people had more time at home. They had more disposable income because they weren't traveling, commuting, weren't having lunches at work and things like that. So then obviously that created this this real struggle for our customers and shippers to have inventory available to sell to those customers. Coupled then with everything that else happened within kind of the past 12 months, or disruptions that's happened within the supply chain, the Ever Given, kind of the significant kind of lockdowns that happen in China when there's COVID cases, it created this kind of perfect storm, really, where supply chains, I think we didn't really appreciate how well oiled supply chains were, and that previously, little disruptions here and there were fine. They would kind of flatten themselves out over a course of a couple of weeks, but we never really appreciate that if you start stacking these up, that it's going to actually be quite significant. So at that time, when I first joined and was speaking to those customers, it was more about going through it with them at the same time. It was like, yeah, this is actually new for everyone. Let's understand how we can help you figure out these challenges as they come along. We know what we know right now. We didn't know that this is going to be that significant 6 months ago, and we're probably on that basis and not going to know how significant it is going to be in the next 6 months. So it was all about then being really open and transparent. And I think that's one of the most striking things as well. One of the biggest things I think has come out of kind of the past couple of years is there's just a requirement now to have really transparent, open conversations and partnerships between shippers and freight forwarders to help overcome these challenges. So back then it was all about how do we overcome the unknowns? How do we help you capitalize on kind of the opportunity that this has arisen for a lot of e-com businesses? And then now we're kind of seeing kind of the reverse of that now, unfortunately. We're seeing that boom now obviously significantly dropped, and then obviously that has the wider implications now in regards to kind of everyone wanting to destock. That's reduced the demand with the shipping lines. We've seen a significant fall in the rates now. So we're a little bit where we were before. It's like, well, actually, it's all a little bit unknown now. Like, what's going to happen? Obviously, unfortunately, for a lot of countries, especially in the UK, the kind of economic situations that are going through at the moment adds on to the uncertainty. So it's all about being open, honest to customers, understanding how we can help them navigate through these challenges together. But it's also around like trying to still find where the areas of value are, the value generation within their supply chain. When the freight rates were as significant as they were, it was, of course, super imperative as a shipper, as an importer, to make sure that they are getting the best and most competitive rates from their forwarders. And it kind of took away maybe some of the areas where shippers should be focusing on to actually further kind of capitalize on freight spend reductions through maybe better consolidation or better routes to market and things like that. Whereas now the rates are where they are. Probably from a procurement perspective for our customers, it's very challenging because it's trying to figure out what the best option is for them, short, mid-term, and long-term. So that's very challenging and something that in solutions we do support with as well. But now definitely we're getting to a point where it's where is all the other areas of value that we can start to really dial in on for our customers across their supply chain. And we in solutions look at broad areas across their supply chain, from freight spend, so things like consolidation, better services, better modes of transport, all the way through some of the benefits from digitization, some of the productivity benefits, but all the way through some of the other areas in regards to working capital, revenue optimization, but also from a sustainability perspective as well. So right now we're like trying to really now dial in with our customers where we can start kind of what we call kind of pulling on those value levers for them. But we are still similar in the way we were a few years back, but now it's kind of the flip side to it, if that makes sense.
It's really interesting as well, because in what you are saying, you're talking a lot about value. You're talking at great depth, actually, about the way in which you're working with customer accounts. And I'm imagining there might be people who think about the freight forwarder customer relationship as something much more simplistic, high level, transactional, almost like the sort of travel agent analogy. But
Yeah.
actually listening to the way that you're talking about the engagement you have with customers, it's totally different and much more, yes, transparent to the point that you're making, but much more
Yeah.
value focused, much more long termist. Do you think that's a sort of I want to say a symptom, but it's not the right word. But do you think that is related to this sort of old versus new world way of freight forwarders, maybe versus digital freight forwarders interacting with their customers?
Yeah, I would, yeah, definitely 100% agree with that. I think traditionally the relationship has been fairly, I would say, transactional. It's been based on really three things. It's been on service, so forwarder's ability to be able to move cargo from A to B and deliver that within the required transit and lead times. It's been about cost. Cost is always there. It's never going to go away, but the relationship has largely been focused on, are you competitive? And then thirdly has been the value add, but very minimalistic value add. It's generally things like shipment reporting, basic levels of visibility. And that's really been kind of the three foundations of kind of a more traditional transactional forwarder relationship. And that works to a certain degree. Like if I'm a shipper and I care about rates and service, then that's fine. I can work on that perspective. I'm a forwarder. I don't need to generally invest in any other areas of my business to drive further value. And if the customer's happy, I'm going to have volume commitment from them, and that's going to be a nice general working relationship. But like I was mentioned, everything that's happened within the pandemic has changed that significantly. Like I said, it's the first time businesses and leaders have gone through that together, and they started asking questions from their forwarders, which maybe the forwarders never been asked before or never had expected that from a transactional relationship. So it's put a lot more pressure on those forwarders to actually think about the partnership perspective with those customers as well. But what's really important as well, kind of want to kind of get across is that Zencargo is a digital freight forwarder, and the digital aspect of what we provide, yes, drives a huge amount of value, but Zencargo is also providing this level of partnership with our customers. And the significant thing is we provide the service, so what Solutions provides to our customers, regardless of the size of those customers. They could be shipping one container a month, or like I said, up to a few hundred containers a month. There's no like levels or kind of bars to entry to kind of what the service or solutions that you get. And then traditional forwarders could offer that. There's no reason why they couldn't offer that, but there's a level to entry where you can actually get that service, or you can get some of the benefits from some of the technology which they provide. And typically that's your very large importers, your strategic accounts for the forwarders, your large retailers, supermarkets, department stores, and things like that. But now this is kind of what the digital forwarders are breaking down, lowering that level now, and we're able to provide that same level of expertise, consultation, the personal touch, the relationship to all of those importers. And they've never needed that more because of the pandemic. And we're able to deliver that more easily because we can deliver value right from the start of the relationship with our customers through our technology. So right from day one, all of our customers are benefiting from our software and our platform, from really great visibility, really great insights into their supply chain. And that just makes that relationship a lot more easier when you can kind of leverage kind of the benefits of the technology right from the beginning. And I think digitization as well is like obviously doesn't just impact freight forwarding. It's been around for a long time in lots of other kind of sectors as well. And a lot of businesses, what I speak to is the bar has been raised. If you are speaking to maybe a kind of a finance department or someone that's like cares about insurance, or anybody who's got experience in those other sectors, they'll be aware that, hang on a minute, like these service providers in these sectors are providing this level of digitization or this level of automation. I therefore expect this as well from my other areas of my business, i.e. my supply chain. And that's putting then that pressure onto the leaders in that department and setting that expectation that I expect this now from my freight forwarder.
Just super interesting. You've said so many things that I kind of want to unpack. One, which is your point around the fact that this kind of access to improved data, better visibility of the overall movement of the supply chain, and then this change in the nature of the relationship between the freight forward and the business, there's a kind of leveling of that access to information and to support, which means that SMEs are much more supported and which is obviously incredibly important in economies like this, even more than it might have been in a very stable, buoyant economy. But also the point that you're making around the expectation on supply chain leaders and the expectation within businesses that everything runs efficiently and that digitization prevails across all sectors. And of course, again, many people, I think, from the outside looking in, make assumptions around the levels of digitization that may already exist in supply chain, or the level of visibility that may already exist. As consumers, we're used to being able to track last mile delivery, or we're used to being able to make a delivery order and watch a man on a bicycle move across our phone screen. Whereas, of course, actually the grand scale movements of goods around the world is much more opaque, unfortunately, for many, many people. I'd love to hear, from a shipper's perspective, because obviously you're working with shippers day to day, they're under a lot of pressure. Never mind because they need to digitize, never mind because the economy's in turmoil and they're dealing with constant firefighting. But when it comes to working with a digital freight forwarder or working on overall supply chain management, what's in it for them? What are the benefits that we've seen? And do you have any sort of tangible examples you can share?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the benefits, the ROI areas are really huge, and they can be as big really as you want to make them, and they can be really as small as they can be. And a lot of the solution work that we do is identifying them, and then it's prioritizing them. Because right now, service, freight, having stock available to the customers, more so now having the right stock and the right quantity available for customers, that is super, super important. But yeah, there's such wide ranging now, like kind of the KPIs, the goals that the leaders in the supply chain now are striving towards. They're at board level now. Like if you read any kind of like annual statements or investor reports from a lot of kind of shippers, page one is all about how they're coping with the supply chain, how they're managing the rate, how they're managing the service, but how they're driving further value within their supply chain. And like the value that we look at right from a kind of very first kind of basis is working with Zencargo. We will ensure that you are getting the service, you're getting the competitive freight rates. We know that that's table stakes. But right from day one, you're going to be able to realize the benefit of us being a digitally enabled freight forwarder. So you're going to have really good visibility of your shipments, of your orders, if you want that, of your products. You're going to have reliable data, you're going to have consistent data, and that's going to enable you to drive productivity benefits or drive better automation. So we look at, if we take that spreadsheet away and now you're using our platform, what does that enable for you now? What does that enable that individual who was producing that report to do now? What can they now focus on? So we look at those really things because they're really quick wins right from kind of day one. And then we start building the value picture. We start understanding over time, if we're doing purchase order management, if we're doing kind of SKU visibility, how can we look at some of the benefits maybe from systems integration? How can we get some of the data out of our platform back into your tech stack to help the wider business make decisions? We look at the value from that. But then we look at much bigger initiatives as well, much more kind of what I say, like more the operational kind of physical initiatives within the supply chain. How can we help our customers drive freight spend reduction through things like consolidation? And we're always tying it into how the data, how our technology is enabling that to be done better. Really great visibility in the supply chain. A lot of the areas of optimization can be drastically improved simply around consolidation, being able to understand the status of an order, its cargo ready date. You can start to build container plans well in advance of when the cargo is actually ready and it's been packaged and it's ready to be loaded into a container. But I suppose to bring that to life a little bit in regards to a few really good kind of examples. So starting probably from, it'd be good actually for me to kind of provide some examples across the journey that we take from solutions with our customers. So a good one would be a large online beauty retailer in the UK. Were previously Feel Unique, have been acquired by Sephora. I'm sure people are aware of Sephora and Feel Unique in the UK and globally. So with Feel Unique at the time, Solutions, it was myself actually, we supported right from those initial conversations. We did what we call an as-is process mapping for them. So we walked through the process of purchase order being raised all the way through to when that's delivered into their fulfillment center. We understood what the steps being taken. We understood what's the stakeholder undertaking those steps, and then we mapped what the challenge or the pain point was against that. We took that away. We then came back and we presented to them what we call our to-be solution, so where some of those challenges and pain points are now being resolved. Some of the main kind of pain points that they had from memory was quite common one was just a lack of visibility. They just didn't know when inventory was arriving into their warehouse, and it would typically arrive on any day, and it'd be a bit of a surprise, but they'd be happy that they've received the order that they'd placed on their supplier. So no visibility, and because it's cosmetics, it's generally quite small in terms of the dimensions, even though the quantity can be quite large. So typically cost-effective modes of transport, things like courier, etc. But that can lead to a lot of complications in regards to visibility and things like that. So they wanted more visibility, they wanted more control, and they wanted to protect or prevent margin erosion from the fact that they'd had no visibility, no control of the mode or service which the orders went down. So we captured those pain points and we presented back to them a phased solution where Zencargo would immediately take responsibility as a freight forwarder and provide visibility over the freight shipments. We then worked to a second phase of the plan where we looked at a consolidation service. So by bringing in all those small, traditionally courier shipments into single consignments and moving them over from the US, East and West Coast into the UK. So that was providing better visibility, better control, but also protecting their spend as well. So providing some cost efficiencies from that. As a phase 3 to that, we built a cost calculator. So using the data in our platform, we built a cost calculator for their buying teams to help them calculate the margin on product based on the different mode and service options that they had. So previously they didn't have any forms of doing that. They knew the cost price from their supplier and they set the sell price without any understanding of what actually the landed cost is, so the cost to actually land that product to the destination, pay for the shipping costs, duties, things like that. So using all the data we're collecting on our platform, we built a calculator to enable their buying teams to then make the right decisions. So we kind of started from minimal change to their supply chain. What can we do now? Provide you immediate visibility of your freight shipments, to then a small kind of part of kind of change management part of driving to better consolidation, making some changes to their process, moving kind of upstream of their supply chain really to then how can we actually drive the right behaviors and decisions of their buying team right in before it's actually is a parcel that we need to figure out, or a carton, figure out what the best way is to handle that shipment. So that'd be a good example of a little bit of kind of combining the power of the data and the platform with driving value through kind of operational improvements and things like that. Another example from probably a data, I say data only perspective would be for a footwear brand, a large footwear brand in the UK, which is Vivo Barefoot. Vivo Barefoot are a certified B Corp company, so that's a benefits corporation. So people be more familiar, maybe they haven't heard of Vivo Barefoot, with Patagonia. They're a B Corp company, so probably expect kind of the level or standards of environmental kind of impact that they have to manage and have strategies and solutions around. So in that regard, we built with Vivo Barefoot some customized emissions reporting for them, and we built some reporting to provide them with really great actionable insights in regards to their emissions and any offsetting strategies that they put in place. It was really important for them to make sure that the data and the calculations are recognized to industry standards. So that's the GHG protocol and ISO 14000. We also made sure that they was compliant with what they required in regards to scope-free emissions as well. So I think we covered 90% of their scope-free emissions through that reporting as well. And that's really a step change for them. Obviously, being a B Corp, like I mentioned, the really high standards that they had, by creating that capability for them, is really helping them to kind of continue on their strategy to be more kind of environmentally conscious. And that's kind of like the first version of that. And we're working very closely with them in regards to strategies to help them reduce their emissions, but also any kind of future requirements that may come from better data and visibility, which is really important to mention as well, that they're going to generate that level of reporting confidence that they can present and get their B kind of certification because of the data that we're having within our platform to generate those calculations and the output.
I want to kind of bring everything that we've spoken about right back, because we've got to the point of really understanding the nirvana. You're working with a digital freight forwarder, your metrics are improving. We know what the end point looks like, but let's remind ourselves why that's so important. So in the world of working, and it's not just about working with traditional versus new freight forwarders, of course there's difference, but in stark contrast to this evolved, value-driven, outcomes-focused world of working in partnership with a freight forwarder to hit your metrics and to grow your business and to understand what success looks like, we may well have listeners to this podcast who are kind of thinking, gosh, that's not what I do with my freight forwarder. And help us understand what maybe the kind of template relationship might look like today. So for lots of other people who are listening, normal might be something quite different. And I'm guessing, but you'll know more than I will. It's probably quite transactional. It's probably conversations that center around bookings and operation. What does that look like? Because then what I want to hear is how to change and how to be able to start moving from that kind of that type of relationship to this more evolved and more value-driven partnership that we've been talking about.
Yeah. Okay. I suppose it's a little bit easy for me to say, but it is really easy. There is no significant barrier to entry, and this is quite common when we're doing the process mapping workshops with our customers, and we're spending all this time to understand their supply chains. And quite often we get kind of the remarks around, is it going to be significant cost to my business to go through and have your capabilities and the services that you provide? And obviously there's some surprises when we say we're digital freight forwarder. This is native to what we provide to you as your freight forwarder. But I think now is the time to not you don't need to put up with now the relationship that you already have. There's these opportunities now, there's these options now to expect so much more. And that's not necessarily that you need to break the relationship with your existing forwarder and move away. There's just now a lot more expectations that you can put on the relationship with your forwarder, and it doesn't necessarily need to be huge change management. It doesn't necessarily need to be immediate full visibility of every SKU that you have within the supply chain, because we know that there's challenges with a lot of our customers in regards to maybe the confidence of their own data quality and maybe their ERP or MRP systems. It has to be this huge leap, I suppose, that I'm trying to explain. It's having conversations with your forwarders to let them know that these are your goals that you have within your organization, within your supply chain. As an individual, what are your goals to get that promotion, get that next pay rise? Have those conversations with your forwarder and just start to put in the steps to move in the right direction against that. And like I said, these don't need to be significant things. Better access to reporting, better access to shipment data, and better confidence in ETA information. These are all things that can really be significant. And like I mentioned earlier, some of the significant areas of value I find is in automation of connecting systems together. We live in a super modern world now. If we forget maybe some of the old-fashionedness in the supply chain, but systems can talk to each other now really simply, and I always find a lot of manual data entry happening when I'm in conversations. Things like that can easily be fixed. So expect a lot more from you forwards. Have those conversations so you're aligned on these are the things I really care about right now. This is what my VP supply chain, this is what the kind of the C-suite team are kind of asking off me. I need you to support me in this journey. How can we make some measurable steps in regards to getting there? And what I find as well is that some customers have obviously different ways in regards to which they procure their freight, or they benchmark, or they find the right forwarder. Quite commonly, shippers work very long-term relationships with their forwarders, which is really great, and that's exactly kind of what we want to build with our customers here. But customers should be, if they think that they're not getting all the value, or shippers think they're not getting all of the value from their supply chain, have those conversations. If you want to explore the other capabilities of working with other freight forwarders, put a little bit of a structure around how you're going to procure that. It doesn't need to be a full-blown tender proposal and kind of process that you have to go through. It can be simple RFI, so request for information, and an RFQ that follows from that. Select some forwarders that you've worked with, some forwarders you haven't worked with, some digital forwarders that you potentially haven't worked with as well. Get that array of different forwarders that suit your needs and capabilities as a shipper. And if I was in that position, I was looking at potentially just seeing what else is out there to drive more value for me. I would think of like kind of 6, I think half a dozen or so key things that I'd be asking within any kind of RFI approach. The first one is technology capabilities. I'd be asking, what technology do you have to help me understand the status of my shipments? Where are you getting that data from? Because I want to be confident in that status, that ETA information. So I'd be asking those questions. So technology, tell me about your technology. Tied to that, I would be asking then the second point around, tell me about your innovation. What is your roadmap? Because you really want to understand how invested a potential partner is in going on that journey and building and growing their capabilities. Kind of linked to innovation, probably the second one, I'll probably be more than 6 at the moment, but second one would be around kind of continuous improvement. So what is your approach to continuous improvement? How are you going to continually work with me to drive improvements in my supply chain? How are you going to be able to help me achieve my goals? So that's super important. So technology, innovation, continuous improvement. So there'll be 2. Things like obviously service and costs is super important to make sure that they have the service expertise and they can meet your commercial terms that you need. Another one would be around corporate social responsibility and sustainability. What can they offer you to help with any corporate strategies that you have as a business to drive more sustainable strategies? But also, what are they doing for themselves in that regard as well? And lastly would be, I don't know if I'm on 6, but lastly would be around relationships. How do they, what's their approach to relationship management with their current customers? And the biggest, most important part of relationship management is how do they manage escalations and issue resolution? We work in supply chain. There's always going to be challenges. There's always going to be escalations, unfortunately. It's the world that we live in. And therefore, it's super important that as a freight forwarder, they have a very pragmatic way to solving challenges for you. So they're the things that's the thing. Going down an RFI approach, structure these things, these questions for those forwarders, and then it's up to that shipper to be able to weight what is most important on each of those, I'd say.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And you, I mean, it's so great to be able to give shippers some tangible help and some kind of structured support. So hopefully anyone that's listening now has a sense of what to look for how to assess. Going down that RFI, then that RFQ route obviously gives you a bit of structure to do that within. So you've got a proper, clear assessment, which is great. And you touched on something which leads on to our very last question of today's podcast, which is, we're in supply chain, stuff goes wrong. You gave the example of the fact that sort of escalation management is incredibly important, but you well know, because you are in Zencargo, that we talk a lot about the fact that shit happens. And every time that we record a podcast episode, we ask our guests to share with us a ship happens moment in their own career, a time when it's felt like the world is collapsing around you. Things have all gone wrong, but you've been able to pull it back and to overcome. I'd love to hear if you've got a ship happens moment that you could share.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't wear the t-shirt. So there's two spring to mind, and the first one I'll summarise because there's lots of detail to it. But essentially, when I was working at Allport, we were launching a new brand for Arcadia at the time. It was going to be, the orders were going to be fulfilled from the US. We had found the right partner in Los Angeles to provide the pick, pack, fulfillment services. As the first container arrived into Long Beach, that provider, unfortunately, at the time decided that they were weren't going to continue with that relationship at the time. I was early 20s, and looking back, I'd been given such a great opportunity to actually lead and deliver on that project, and there's so many learnings from that. But at that time, when I was in the thick of it, I was in Los Angeles at the time, which I thought was really great because I was in LA, but I wasn't enjoying any of the benefits of that. And then finding out that I had to find a new service provider right at the last minute. And this was a really big launch for this brand. Ultimately, long story short, we found the right partner. Were able to successfully deliver on that project, but it was a very, very stressful couple of weeks to try and find that, find the right partner. I do have a second one actually, and I'll say this one as well. I hope you don't mind one too, because this one is a little bit funny, really, and it haunts me to this day. And I have now; it's like embedded in my brain every time I do some analysis. So, I was doing some analysis for a large UK supermarket, understanding the benefit of consolidation, just reducing the number of 20 foots and shipping more 40 foots. A lot of the charges to calculate the ROI were in US dollars. At the time, the exchange rate to GBP was probably a lot better than what it is today. I made a very schoolboy error of not doing any currency conversion when the value was presented back, the ROI was presented back to very senior members at the supermarket at the time. And very quickly got pointed out that I hadn't done any conversion, and I was presenting value as GBP, which is in US dollars.
How did you pull it back?
I pulled it back. Well, yeah, it was simple to pull it back, and I don't know what excuse I made at the time, but it was a good mistake to learn, because now every time it's ingrained in me. Have I done the conversion of the ROI? But yeah, it's the schoolboy one, I'd say.
I think we've all had a moment a bit like that when we realise we've made what seems like a silly mistake, and it's got quite significant consequences. But a good lesson that we can always pull it back. Well, look, James, it's been so fantastic to hear so many great stories and useful advice, and to hear that picture from you around when partnership is done well between a customer and a freight forwarder, and data is used and relationships are built, what that can mean for a business, because we know it can be transformational, and hopefully our listeners are getting more of a sense of that. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for sharing so much insight.
No problem. It's been a pleasure.
It's been great to have you. And a huge thank you also, obviously, to our listeners. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast, and to wait for some other fantastic guests coming up in the future, just like James. And if you've got any questions, do get in touch on LinkedIn. We love to hear from you. And until next time, goodbye.